I'm Nicole.
I'm Geraldine.
I'm Lauren.
And this is
Doing the Damn Thing, an entrepreneurship talk show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of Doing the Damn Thing. We're so happy that you are here with us. As you can tell, we're all still virtual because we're all still in shelter in place. So today's topic is actually going to be, we're going to talk about, should we be a remote society? Because we're all now working remotely, and all four of us, we know one of the privileges we all have is that we get to work remotely. So we're going to dive into that today. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. So ladies, how has been working remotely, especially during these times? Deep question in the beginning.
I've always been kind of service-based, I guess. So I go out to meet clients, but then I work from home. So it's always been kind of a part-time home thing. And now I'm just feeling like I'm spending all my time at home. But I'm actually really liking the shift for me because this is kind of the life that I was hoping to build. I'm also a part-time bartender, so that requires me going to work and having a commute and hours and all that. But I'm kind of hoping to shift into this more remote society for my entrepreneurial dreams, I guess, but that's not necessarily how everyone works. I just like to manage my own free time, so I think that's why I made my own business, and working remotely only assists me in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I'm such a people person. So it's really actually pretty difficult to not be in person with people, even though clearly, I had this whole story before about video chats and doing, even before COVID and we were doing stuff in our business, people would ask if they could meet online. And I'd always be like, well, I really would prefer to meet in person. And so this has been a little challenging for me. Even you guys, I'm looking at all of you and realizing wow, we haven't actually been in person in 3 months, you know? And we've been fine, but there is some element that's missing. And there was a Psychology Today article about the ways that this is training our brains differently because we're not using a lot of the senses that we typically do. We're not, our pheromones, our sense of smell, of touch, and all that. And so in some ways it's sharpening other skills, but then we're also losing some of those skills. And a lot of those skills I really are kind of part of my identity. So I'm still kind of on the fence about it, honestly.
Yeah.
How about you, G?
For me personally, I actually love it. And it's done so much. What's different is that it's impacting my personal life, my self-care, and also my business life. So in business, just like Carmen was saying, I totally align with the whole idea of creating what my life is going to be like. So that's there for sure. And then for my personal life, so I'm quarantining with my best friend, her sister, and my boyfriend. And this is the longest amount of time I've ever spent with my boyfriend, and we've been together for 11 years. So when we're with each other, day in, day out, day and night. We're not having
here.
Yeah, so it's been very interesting in our relationship for that, and for self-care, the ability to be able to do things for myself, cook for myself on a regular basis and things like that. That wasn't present before, so I'm getting to see what that's like, and it's wow, it's I feel really blessed and spoiled.
I agree with that part too, actually. Yeah. The self-care, all that's, yes, I agree with you.
The self-care has been I feel the first few weeks I was doing a really good job of self-care, and then after a while you sort of get bored of giving yourself spa days. You're
wow. Quarantine at your house.
Yeah. But so a lot of you, I've been working remotely since 2016, but even before that, when I worked in the nonprofit sector, my job was really from home and then in the field. So I hadn't had a job in a long time where I had to go into an office and be there for 9 to 5. I knew from the get-go that was just, I'm not that type of employee. But I feel working from home, especially during this time, I think one of the negative effects, maybe you guys are feeling it, is because you feel you have all this time. You're working a lot more, and so when does that stop time happen, right? Because you don't have you don't have a clock, you're not checking out at anywhere. So I feel like sometimes I have really long days. But I liked the positive is I feel like if I'm going somewhere, there's more of an attention now. Like I have to go somewhere. Like it's not like I'm trying to fill my days with activities of like going here and there. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go do this, and I have to plan it out and everything like that. So I feel like because my in-person interactions in this time have been just like with my family, and I feel like it's just been more intentional. So.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not missing traffic, definitely not missing like having to be late places, although like sometimes I'm actually even late online. I'm also like, I'm in kind of an interesting place too, because during this whole time I've transitioned from, Geraldine and I were business partners, and now I've transitioned out of that business and I'm starting a new business that was about retreats and workshops. So it's not like really actually got to form. And clearly we're not doing that in this time. So it's funny because you said, I felt a twinge of guilt because you're like, I just work like I don't know the stop time. And I'm like, damn, I feel like I'm not working enough. But I don't think that has anything to do with being remote or not. That just happens to be like a weird parallel with where I'm at in my business.
Yeah. So like I think this conversation came up because we were talking about like the bigger picture, right? Of a lot of companies now, especially if you work at a company, are starting to see that people can work remotely and that we are all adults and we can be functional at home. But should we go that route as a society? Should we be always like working remotely? Like, so what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I feel like it. Oh, go ahead, Carmen.
I just think we can definitely work remotely and then play non-remotely, like a lot of places are thinking about all these ideas to be open air and like, for the safety of everybody to have like gyms be outside or restaurants have outside seating. And I think like that I'm really about, like, let's move into this kind of open air society. But then like, there really is no use for me to commute to sit at a computer if I can sit at a computer at home. So there are a lot of things. And then like, restaurants, they've been getting a lot of looser laws, we can actually do drinks to go, or you can kind of like a lot of like alcohol laws are getting loose. And it's like, that's the kind of society, like those things that we probably should have been afforded these freedoms and haven't. I'm all about that. So like, it's been like a nice shift in that sense. But like, at the same time, I do kind of crave the group setting too. Like I'm craving that. I don't want to be totally remote and totally isolated. The fact that I go see my clients is helpful, but I am kind of missing that group aspect. And some people work better in groups. Some people work better in the office setting and they are held more accountable. At home, I think everybody knows the challenges are working at home with distractions and like getting unmotivated. So like there's a drawback to that. Just depends on your style. But having the freedom to choose maybe would be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I feel like it just makes so much sense, for different types of employees or workers or whoever to have that choice to work somewhere or not. And I feel like it would help our economy if we were a mostly remote society, because then we wouldn't have to be investing in these big office buildings or spaces or any. And that would allow for the small businesses as well as the big businesses to utilize their funds in other ways.
And then they can use those buildings for like to house the homeless or to like do other things. I'm like, what's going to happen? We just spent, especially in Oakland, like we just went through a 6-year period where they built so many frickin' buildings that now the question is like, if we do go remote, what's going to happen? But I think also we're like in kind of a false scenario right now because we're in quarantine. So like there's a lot of things that we don't know what would be different if everybody was working from home and we were able to move freely,
Yeah. So I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think for at least big companies and maybe especially people that need that human interaction, I think downsizing their offices will make sense, but allowing their employees to still come into an office when they need to, like especially if you're like on a product team or something like that, where you need to you're on a team. You really need to talk to someone, you know, in person. And then also just, I feel like I brought this up, I think, for like, I think on our last meeting, but that we are sort of also assuming everyone has a comfortable office space at home, right? And so it's also like, you know, we see this a lot with like kids also, where you assume everyone has like a healthy home to do schoolwork. So I think we should have office space so people could be like, okay, I could go into the office and get my work done, but it's not required of me to be there, right? It's just like I need to let people know that I'm going to be in the office, so if they want to do a meeting with me in person. But yeah, I feel like throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, you know?
Like, what about co-working spaces?
I was just going to say that.
Like, yeah, the future of, you know, flexible work and workspace.
Yeah, and also that speaks to what it also allows. I mean, I suppose there's for a portion of the work you need to be on the same time format, but like for instance, Geraldine, I know she works best at like midnight and 1 o'clock. So like, huh?
It's not true anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a lot of artists that are that. Oh,
Yes.
or people that, you know, we all also have different kind of like working rhythms. So perhaps that would help to support people more in being successful because they can go into more of their natural rhythms, you know. I mean, like I said, of course, there's going to be meetings and times where you need to interact more on the same time schedule. But
yeah, definitely. I think co-working spaces is an interesting concept. I think for many freelancers, co-working spaces would still be a good place. But I think for people that work at big companies, you know, the company might have to figure out, like, do we want to shut down our office or just buy a lot of co-working spaces, right? And what if they have like very private information that they sort of just want on like their devices and their like servers and all.
Servers. Yeah.
But you can log in remotely to servers. So like another thing that would, besides obviously what we said about traffic, like so people aren't commuting, it also actually allows for the potential for co-working spaces in different areas surrounding big big places where they could, because that came up when you said they could just buy a bunch of different co-working spaces, essentially like hubs in different areas, co-working spaces.
Yeah. I think we would probably also see maybe some co-working spaces pop up in not just urban areas, because people need to also realize people were commuting into usually like cities and then they live in that maybe outskirts. Like there's maybe not a co-working space near their home, but it would be nice if there was, so they could go do their work and interact with other people and maybe interact with the recruiter if they want to leave their company, something like that, you know? But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see like maybe more co-working spaces pop up. But it also depends on like how is COVID going to be something we're going to be living with, and our co-working space is going to be like a viable like business, because if you have to stay indoors, you know? But it's also,
or if they could only operate at like a certain percentage of people within the space, is that sustainable for that business model?
Yeah. But what do you guys think about like, because it's all about like, you know, working remotely, you know, we all get to do it freelance, you know, as like freelancers, and we're pretty much comfortable with it. But what about like people that maybe don't live in this type of area? You know what I mean? And so would working like remotely, especially maybe if you live in an area that's a little bit like rural or countryside, what's the negative effects of like you don't usually see a lot of people, so when you do go to like maybe the grocery store, that's like your time to see people, but now that you're working remotely, like the negative effects of like that on your mental health, like, you know,
Well, I think it could potentially actually, the effect would be that because we are working remotely, more people would actually move out of the cities into these more rural places, where then you could set up more like like smaller hubs within these things, which quite honestly I think is probably more beneficial for us as a society anyways, right? To be in these places where you see, where you're able to go into these smaller areas, people know who you are, there's more accountability, so like hopefully like the way you treat people is more kind of like you're held to that, and then also just the fact that then you also can see people you know and hang out. I mean, those last few years in the Bay Area have been so, like, I haven't seen my friends in so long, you know, because of the hustle that everyone's doing just to be able to live in the city. So, like, how about if we bring it rural, give ourselves some space and time, and then get to, like, actually connect with one another? Even though it's that irony of, like, being online, you know, it's like a weird.
Yeah. It's like, I think a lot of time people are realizing now with all of us having to communicate through video chat and stuff is that we're actually connecting with people that we haven't connected with in a while. And you're able to access a lot of, like, you know, resources from around the world because we're doing everything remotely. So it has, like, opened up a lot for us as far as connections. And, like, I think we also realized that as well, Lauren, that, like, what's important, our connections with people, seeing our family, seeing our friends. Like, when we can't do that right now, I think we're all realizing how much that affects us and how much it is really important. And if we had a whole other way of life to where you didn't have to be in a destination, you didn't have to be in San Francisco to work in tech, you didn't have to be, you know, in all these places to do these certain things, that would open up a lot. But also I was thinking that maybe there's a lot of industries that can't be remote. So, like, what happens to those people? Is it a privilege to be remote? Like, where's the equity in this remote society? Like, oh, well, good for you. You get to stay home all day or do whatever you want and make your own schedule. But there are people who still have to be physically at their jobs.
Yeah. Like, for example, like, both my parents still have to be physically at their job. My dad is a teacher at a prison. And then my mom, it works at, like, a Kaiser call center. So both, during this whole time, they both had to, like, go to work. I mean,
both of those could be put remotely, honestly.
Yeah.
A call center, I've worked for a call center, and you know, I mean, potentially. Not saying that our system's set up for it right now, but
Right.
Yeah, I mean, even that, it's like making sure everyone has, like, a Kaiser approved, like, laptop and, like, has, like, you know, able to do all that. And for my dad, I think also, like, making sure all the prisoners have access to technology so they could do the class, because he's just, like, helping them get their, like, GED. So also putting that in place, because it's also, like, bringing up a good point, is, like, working remotely also could be, you know, thought of as a privilege, because to work remotely, you have to have access to technology, right? And not everyone does. So then it's harder for them to actually maybe stay connected with people.
It would be the employer's, like, responsibility to, rather than paying for those big high rises, you pay for the proper technology for your employees. But then there's also just ones that I don't know if it's necessarily privilege. It's just that, like, bars, like you said, you have to go and be a bartender. If we're going to keep, there are certain things that if we're going to keep infrastructure running, we need actual physical people there. I mean, but I think Geraldine, like, as far as I just had the thought, like, what if there were no retail storefronts anymore, and everyone had to do it online? First of all, Geraldine, who knows how to build websites, that'd be, like, an amazing thing for her business, right? But, like, yeah, why don't we could all go online, and actually these small boutique owners then actually have a farther reach. Like, all of our businesses that are, like, when people live in rural areas that they can't support Black-owned businesses or women-owned businesses necessarily, now they can go online and they could have it shipped to them or something. You know?
Yeah. It's interesting to think about the impact on industry, because I keep on thinking about how gas stations are open, but I'm pretty sure that not as many people are filling up on gas. You know, like, I've got, you know, usually I'd fill up on gas like 3 or 4 times a month, and now I'm like, one gas tank will last me for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
You know? So which industries that are normally really huge industries are not going to survive, and what happens with that? What's the impact if the oil industry doesn't really have enough to sustain itself, because oil is also used in other ways as well. So
yeah, I think it just popped in my mind, one of the I don't want to say negative, but, like, we're all connecting online, but we're all connecting online with people maybe we already knew, right? And so I'm always thinking, like, well, what's going to happen? Like, are we all not going to be able to build new friendships as easily? Because, for example, like, a lot of my new friends, like, you meet in person, right? You meet at, like, a bar or at a networking event, and then that relationship blossoms. But if we're not doing that, like you're only then attending events that maybe your friend invited you to, and you're really only talking to still like your friends, your colleagues, and your family, like how are building new relationships going to look during this time, right?
I've made actually in this last year and a half, even before COVID, I've made quite a few friends through Instagram, like randomly. It's so weird. Like it's almost like it's the new networking place where you're just like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what it's going to take is, like, for any changes, you have to be able and willing to adapt to the situation, because there are, you know, bi-coastal networking events or national networking events. But if you're not somebody who's used to attending online networking things or finding new friends through these social platforms, like you're kind of going to be stuck with what you're familiar with already.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take that openness to really expand your network or perspective.
One thing that I was just thinking is, so tomorrow I start teaching at San Francisco State online, and it's the first time the whole class is online. And just thinking about the state of education and the way that now, like the universities are going to be that's going to be a huge shift if this is, because I think they're even saying now that in fall they're going to be remote too. So that's three class periods remote, that now all of a sudden all those buildings, all that stuff, and students then don't have, like, you could literally attend and not pay out of state tuition, which gouges you, like.
And that's a class issue too, and that's like reducing people's access to having an education. So being able to like do remote school and not have to go move there to do school.
Yeah, especially if you want to go to San Francisco and then the rent is $3,000 a month.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching this video and for joining us. Make sure to comment below any kind of thoughts you may have on how we should work remotely. Should we work remotely? How should that look? Your hopes, your fears, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.